Hi everyone! So like the end of our garter stitch cowl, we are going to seam our stockinette stitch cowl with an invisible seam. I'm going to show you how to work that. It's basically exactly the same as how we did it in garter stitch, with the caveat that is actually a little bit easier to see in stockinette stitch. But first off, I have my two little swatches here, and I wanted to show you quickly what a little magic blocking can do. I just very quickly ran this under the steam of an iron, and it flattened out nicely, and it's going to be so much easier to work with than this swatch that is curling in onto itself. Stockinette stitch does have a tendency to do that. So with a little love and blocking, you'll have a piece like this if you just run some steam over it, and it'll be so much easier to work with. So I'm gonna run and quickly block this guy, and I will be right back to show you how to seam. So I'm back with my two identical swatches. Remember that we do want to seam the same number of stitches from the cast on edge to the bind off edge. So if at some point in your project you have had some mystery increases, just make sure you decrease down to the same number of stitches by knitting two together at the end of a few rows, just to make sure that those numbers do line up. So like in garter stitch, we are now basically just going to line up the columns with one another. You'll see that, like I mentioned, it's a bit easier in stockinette because all of these V's are very easy to see. So I'm going to match up this column. This is the center of the V. You'll see what I mean. This is the V column I want to be looking at, to this column right here. And this is going to be the center. So an easy way to do this is I'm just going to go into the middle of one of the V's on this column, the top one. I'm going to come in from the back of the bottom piece. And when I come up to this piece on the top here, I actually want to scoop two legs of that stitch. So this is the middle, but I want to come in from the right side and scoop that entire stitch, both legs, and bring my yarn through there. And then when I come back down to this bottom piece, I'm going to want to enter the stitch from whence it came out and grab two legs so that I will be coming out from the center of the next column. So you'll see that I've created another V-stitch, and this is why it's an invisible seam. So I'm just gonna do that across the entire row, coming up here, picking up two legs. My yarn gets tangled. Coming back down, picking up two legs, making sure you come up through the center of the next column. And I'm just going to work across the row like that. All right, so I've done the entire row across, and now you'll see that you'll have these little gaps at the edges. The important thing was to match up your columns so that they line up. And now we're gonna fix those gaps at the edges. I'm gonna turn the piece around and just whip stitch like I did with the garter stitch cowl. So whip stitching is when you, what I like to do, if your yarn is coming up from the top piece, I'm just gonna come under the bottom piece, grab the top piece again on the edge, and you'll go in the same direction each time. bottom piece to top piece, bottom piece to top piece, bottom piece to top piece. Just a few stitches across like that is fine. And then to bury this, I'm just gonna go into this kind of loop tunnel that we formed now, pull it through, and snip the end right there. And the same thing on the other side, and that was why we should have left a tail. So there you go, there's your invisible seam. And if you've done it with the same color yarn, you're not gonna see anything at all. You'll see now my edges line up. It does pucker just a little bit, but it's not going to be very noticeable. So there you go. Happy knitting, and you've finished your stockinette stitch cowl.